I want to talk a little bit about goals on the line of how do you lose 37 pounds and write a book. I'm just going to kind of give you that as an example. For 24 years of my adult life, by choice, I weighed well over 200 pounds. I say by choice because, you see, I have never accidentally eaten anything. I mean, it's always been deliberate. And when I choose to eat too much today, I have chosen to weigh too much tomorrow. You can choose to set goals and realize your potential, or you can choose not to set them. Now, if you choose not to set them, you got to understand that the consequences are not going to be good down the road. For 24 years, I was going to lose that weight. As a matter of fact, in 24 years, I lost several thousand pounds of weight. How many of you already know exactly what I'm talking about? But it wasn't until I wrote it down, put a date on it, listed the obstacles I had to overcome, identified the people, the groups, the organizations I needed to work with, spelled out a plan of action, set that time limit in there, and identified all of the benefits to me. It was only when I did that that the goal became a reality, and I lost the weight. For 10 or 15 years, I was going to write a book. You know anybody who's going to do just a whole lot of things, folks? I was going to write a book. But it wasn't until I got busy writing the book and writing the plans first before the book ever materialized. Now, if it sounds like I'm trying to sell you on having goals, how many of you are getting close already? How many of you are becoming convinced right quick like that you need to have those goals? There's no question about it. The immortal J.C. Penney many, many years ago said, "Give me a stock clerk with a goal, and I'll give you a man who will make history. But give me a man without a goal, and I'll give you a stock clerk." Now, the interesting thing is goals do not care who has them. Let me give you a classic example of the way they work. In 1950, a war-torn, devastated Japan, a nation which had lost an incredibly high percentage of its young men. Their cities were in ruins. They had been bombed out. But in 1950, they got together. They, meaning industry and government, got together and set a goal. The goal was, we're going to be the #1 nation in the world during the 1950s in the production of textiles. In 1959, ladies and gentlemen, they accomplished that objective. In 1960, they set another goal. We're going to be the #1 nation in the world in the production of steel. Now, when you understand there's no iron ore in Japan of any significance, there's no coal of any significance there, we're going to be the #1 nation in the world in the production of steel, it seemed like an absurd goal, and yet they reached their objectives. They had taken all of the steps. In 1970, the Japanese set another goal. They said during the 70s, we'll be the #1 nation in the world in the production of automobiles. They missed it, folks. 1 year. It took them until 1980. In 1980, they set another goal. And this time their goal was, we're going to be the #1 nation in the world in the production of computers and electronics. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, you absolutely must have those goals. You got to write them down. You got to put a date on it. You got to identify those obstacles. You've got to identify the people, the groups you need to work with. You got to find out what it is you need to know. You got to develop a plan of action, and you got to write it down. What's in it for me? Now, that's a formula that I have just given you, pure and simple. Now, if I were to ask you what 3 times 3 was, there isn't a person here who could not instantly answer it. But if I were to ask you what is 5,128 times 2,165, odds are enormous that very few of you could pop out the answer that quickly. But if I were to say to you, get your pencil and paper out, figure it out, then all of you could figure it out. Why? You know the formula. Now, you see, if you know the formula, it really doesn't make any difference, ladies and gentlemen, what the goal really is. When I started to write the book, I took precisely the same steps that I'm talking about. I wrote down the objective. I wrote down the time I completed or expected to complete the book. I identified the obstacles there. And yes, I know this is repetitious. It's the mother of learning. I wrote out and identified the people, the groups, the organizations I needed to work with. I devised a plan of action to do it. I spelled out what I needed to know, and I wrote it all down, what's in it for me. So how do you build a good, healthy self-image? Number one is you take inventory. You take a physical inventory. For example, many insurance companies will insure certain parts of your body. They guarantee if you lose an eye, they'll give you X number of dollars. If you break a leg or lose a leg, they'll give you X number of dollars. But let me ask you a question. How much would you take for an arm, for a leg, for an ear, for an eye, for any part of your body? When you begin to analyze it, I have seen where juries and insurance companies have literally paid millions of dollars for eyes and for legs and for broken backs and all of those things. So when you analyze it physically, you are worth millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. You are important. Mentally, let's take a little inventory about you. You see, if they were to try to duplicate your brain with a computer, experts have estimated that it would take a building the size of an Empire State Building to house it. That it would literally cost in excess of $100 million, maybe $1 billion or $10 billion. And even with all of that expenditure, it still could not do what you instantly do on an everyday basis, and that is originate a thought. And what I want to say is when you analyze the you, when you analyze an inventory, physically, mentally, and spiritually, you are somebody. And that ought to make you feel good. Step number two to build that image is you need to make up and dress up and go up. When you dress up, you feel better in test after test after test. They have proved beyond any doubt that students perform better in school. They're more orderly. They're more mannerly. They have proved that salespeople in stores and on call sell better when they are dressed up properly, and the ladies are made up, and the guys have their appropriate dress on for themselves. They feel better. How many of you have experienced that? So step number two, if you want to improve your image, you make up and you dress up and you go up. And then, of course, you need to listen to speakers. And the truth is, that's exactly what you're doing. Listen to teachers. Listen to preachers. Listen to people who have something to say, who will give you a lift and make you feel better about yourself. Then the next step you can take is remember, you oftentimes need to walk before you can run. A high jumper who can jump 6 feet is not going to go out on the first day or the first jump he takes and say, set it at 6 feet, that's as high as I can go. He'll put it a little lower, and his confidence builds as he goes up. When we teach our children to become cooks and really do things around the house, we don't move them from oatmeal cookies to baked Alaska, do we? We move them one short step at a time. You don't go from 2 times 2 to 28,961 times 49,368. But you take some steps along the way there, and every step gives you that extra amount of confidence. As a sales manager, occasionally some of our people used to get in a little slump from time to time. We've all seen it happen. And what we would do is encourage them to take the lowest priced product we had, a small item with a low ticket value, and simply go make a few sales there. That got the momentum going, and then we would move them up to the next one, and the first thing you know, they are really doing well. The next step is you need to join the Smile and Compliment Club. Now, I want to emphasize a point. I believe with all my heart, my philosophy has been for a long time, that you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. And when I talk about the Smile and Compliment Club, I mean simply that if you will look at people and smile, And if you will compliment them on some specific observable behavior, now that is a key there, then they're going to feel better. And you know, the interesting thing is when they feel better, they'll grin all over, and in most cases they will just thank you profusely. They'll feel better, but you know what? You're going to feel even better than they will. Now, remember a moment ago I said you can have everything in life you want if you'll just have enough